Welcome to the 7 People Podcast, your guide to creating irresistible organizations.
And today we will talk about the trending topic, AI. And we will answer the question, AI, the new HR intern or not? And for this episode, as we are not subject matter experts, we invited a guest speaker today, Leandro da Silva, founder of YOU.BUT.AI and currently working at Loop Earplugs.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Maybe you can give us a brief introduction in what you do and how you are an AI expert.
Yeah, thanks. So my name is Leandro. I started working with AI before ChatGPT became, I called it singularity. When 3.5 came out, the world learned, hey, there's an AI that we can talk to. Mm-hmm. Before that, I was already very interested in machine learning, what it could do. I'm not a coder. I'm not an engineer. I'm looking more at the practical side of how we can apply it.
Yeah.
So ChatGPT actually opened up a new horizon. Like, hey, we can suddenly start achieving a lot of things by just talking to a machine instead of coding it. So that's how it started. Currently at Loop Earplugs, there I am responsible for, basically recruitment, but also doing a lot of AI initiatives within our broader people team. So from everything recruitment to also helping L&D, Comp and Ben to explore what AI might be able to do for them.
Really cool.
Nice, yeah, and I think like a lot of our listeners would be curious in that. So like, what does that involve? Because when I listen to recruiters, I hear them talking a lot about automating the process, but what about the other teams like Comp and Ben's and L&D, for example?
Yeah, so I think it's always important to make the distinction between AI and automation. It's not the same thing, right? So automation is when you know that there's a task that you're doing continuously throughout the day. For example, let's talk about people operations and creating contracts. Mm-hmm. Let's say I make an offer to someone, I send it over to people ops. Basically, they're retrieving the same information over and over again, putting it into a contract, sending that contract out to the person. It's the same steps that you're taking. That's where automation can really play a role, not necessarily AI.
Yeah, because that automation is more like using Google Forms to populate the contract.
For example, because it's the same data that you're using and the same exact steps that you're using. So you could do Google Forms, you can use Zapier, for example, Make.com. These are platforms that will help you in a fairly easy low-code way or no-code way to get to those goals. Whereas AI is really meant to help you think and be more of a sparring partner than just picking up and doing the same thing over and over again.
Yeah. And I mean, AI, it already exists, I think, since 1950 or something, or the modern concept of it.
Yeah.
And it is booming since 2023. And mainly, I think, because of ChatGPT. Can you explain why it's already existing quite a long, but why it's so booming since 2023?
Yeah. It's actually the groundbreaking thing was something called the GPT. So ChatGPT was never meant to be called ChatGPT. That's the funny part. They never wanted to brand it as ChatGPT because a GPT is a general purpose transformer, which is just a technical term. Because of a paper that was written that enabled AI to interact with us the way that it does today. And OpenAI was like, let's just introduce as ChatGPT. That's our internal name. We all picked it up. And they had to sort of adopt it, but it was never the idea. So the GPT, the transformer, figuring out the architecture of the AI, that was the main differentiator, that we can actually talk to it like it's a human.
Yeah.
So you had a Turing test that was invented by Alan Turing back in the day. We had to reinvent the Turing test a few times because, obviously, the way we are interacting with AI today, mainly generative AI.
Is that the test like to... I remember this one, something about like whether it knows it's an AI or something like this.
Whatever it can pass as human.
Oh, right, yeah. If I'm talking to it and I don't know if it's an AI or a human.
So you have to guess, am I talking to a human or am I talking to a machine?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Today, I think most models would pass as human by those standards that were put back in the day. So we have reinvented the Turing test quite a bit. Yeah.
And I mean, I think majority of our listeners, for example, I am as well, is using ChatGPT and is using AI, maybe even more tools. How do you think AI would impact HR and recruitment, our jobs?
Yeah, I think there's a huge impact.
Yeah.
But let's take one step back. Let's look at the impact of it on the workforce in general, right? So actually in the car on the way over here, I was listening to this new research done by Anthropic, who is the competitor of OpenAI, and they have the Claude models. And basically what came out of their study is productivity is, for example, a 3x improver. So you are much more productive. It will impact certain jobs. And how can we translate that to HR is basically, I think roles like, for example, sourcing will become very different. I think people operations will become very different. I think you'll need less people to do the same job. So we need to start thinking about, hey, what we're doing on a day-to-day basis, which parts of that can be done by a machine and which parts need to be done by a human, which means critical thinking is, for example, a very important one where machines are not that great at.
No. And do you then also think, we should fear our jobs in a way, or?
I think not in the next 12 months.
Okay.
If you ask a lot of CEOs, I think over 80 to 90%, depending a little bit on the source that you're looking at, are saying we want to reduce workforce by using AI. Amazon is a big one on that as well. AI is definitely not there yet. It still makes too many mistakes. It cannot necessarily take the right decision, not ask itself the right questions always. There has been improvements. There's this new development called a reasoning model, where actually the AI is in discussion with itself and it's thinking.
Yeah.
That is a step in the right direction, but I don't see that changing in the next 12 months. What I do see changing is something that's called the Agentic Age of AI.
And what is that?
So basically, we're going to get agents. Agents are smaller AI models that are very, very good at doing one particular task. So if we look at ChatGPT, that's a general purpose model. So it's just very good at knowing a little bit of everything. So it's the generalist, let's say. But what if we start building the specialists of AI models? So you have a specialist in, for example, comp and ben. You have a people operations, et cetera, et cetera. So you start mimicking these roles. And ideally, you actually dissect the role into smaller pieces as well. So you'll basically become a manager of AI models. That's where I think things are heading. So instead of having a lot of human middle management, you'll start getting a new role that is managing AI systems.
Wow.
And that's going to be completely different than anything we've encountered so far.
Like, there's two things I wanted to say, right? And not to get too philosophical about it, but there's always been technological advancements in the history of humankind, right? This is where my bachelor's degree in history is coming in. And like, there's always this thing like, oh yeah, it's going to take our jobs, it's going to take our jobs. But actually what happens is it just means people's jobs change.
100%. So I tried to dive into this and no one knows, right? No one knows, no one has the answer. There are some reports, for example, I believe it was Gartner that said, hey, we're going to gain about 80 million jobs by AI, but we're going to lose 400 million. So we have to start thinking about things like UBI, universal basic income. There are others that say the opposite of that. So we're all guessing here. But if we look at the history of any big inventions such as the steam power, electricity, etc., everyone had the fear to lose their jobs. Everyone was like, how are we going to survive this? And we're all fine.
Yeah.
Right? We didn't think we would have podcasts. Like, that's a job right now. Having a podcast studio, also being an editor, being a host, a podcast host. Not too long ago, you could only do this on TV, right? So every new innovation comes with a new set of jobs. Yeah,
because like there's innovation and things change. We don't know what the future will hold, and then new things will come up. Yeah.
And everyone's figuring it out as well as we go.
So like one thing I want to talk about is, obviously like myself and Flo are HR professionals. And then because what I noticed in my role is that mainly ChatGPT, let's say we're using the most. what it enables me to do is get to a prototype phase way faster, right? Like I'm lucky in the sense that my role is quite creative and usually working on projects, improvement projects. So I can get to my prototype way faster, gives us and the leadership team more time to actually talk about it and discuss. Like before, where it was like way longer in development, and now I'm able to discuss more with the leadership and then iterate what we're doing, get more input. So for me, like the project timeline's still kind of staying the same. It's just enabled us to have more time for discussion.
And more time for the critical thinking and creative part of things. And nowadays, you're so busy with the admin or I don't know, all the nitty gritty stuff.
All the stuff you actually don't like to do on a day-to-day basis, right? Let's be honest. Who loves to do admin every day?
No one. Or I don't, but...
I don't either. There might be people out there. But I rather have AI take care of that and that I supervise that because, again, I see AI as a partner. There's actually two different models of looking at this. You can see it as a cyborg and a centaur. So the cyborg is the one that is fused with AI. So everything that you do is in collaboration with AI. And then the centaur is the person that says, you know what, let's do this part of my job is fully AI. I let just do it. And I'll focus on this part of the role. So there's different ways of doing this. No right or wrong. It's just, hey, whatever suits you.
Yeah, so we really need to think differently, I think, about work in the future.
Yeah.
So that is also why I think it's so important to start adapting AI now in your organization or your day-to-day work. And don't wait for your manager to say, hey, start working with this AI tool, do it yourself, right? I mean, I think that is very important.
If you don't want to be replaced, then yes, I do think that the people that take initiative and look at, hey, what can AI do for me? Learn how to prompt. It's not that technical. It really isn't. It's really about how well can you explain a task to someone. Do that same thing with AI.
Yeah.
And that will really help you to be in front of the pack because if we look at AI adoption rates across organizations, it's actually pretty low. It's pretty low. It's less than 50%. So do you want to be in those top performers or on the other side?
Yeah, because maybe that is also a nice follow-up question for, like, now we talked more about the impact of our jobs, but what can an impact be on organizations and, for example, on their KPIs or their productivity?
Yeah, so ranging a little bit differently per job, of course. Yeah. But in general, we could say it's safe to assume that it would be about a 3x increase in productivity. The question is, what's the impact of that on how we value jobs as well? Does it mean that we're going to value it more highly, so we're going to pay people more because they became more productive? Or is it actually going the other way because intelligence in general is becoming cheaper to access? And that's something we don't know yet, how that's going to turn out.
Yeah, we were talking like off air about, and I was saying how, AI is going to disrupt the knowledge economy, and then that means knowledge is worth less money because we have this intelligence, right? But then I certainly feel that using the prototyping example earlier, like because I'm an expert in my field, and I think you said as well, right? If you know kind of the general outcome you're looking for, then that means you can do better prompts and get there faster, right? It's not just a case like if you have zero knowledge, you can just create, I don't know, compensation philosophies, right? Like someone who doesn't know what that is couldn't just prompt GPT to make it because they'd be like, they don't know what they're looking for.
Well, they can, but the outcome will probably be subpar, to say the least. So generative AI is basically one big prediction. So it just predicts. It's like autocomplete. It predicts the next word. It does that super well, but not perfectly. So if you are not an expert and you don't know how to rate the answer that it's giving you, you could be going in a certain direction, put hours and hours into it, and find out that is complete horseshit. So there's this very famous case of a lawyer, for example, in the States that created a whole case, presented to the judge. Judge was like, "Wow, this is amazing. You're definitely going to win this." And then they found out that all of the citations were just hallucinated. So he lost the case. It was thrown away. Wow. And he actually lost his license to practice as well. Yeah. Why? Because he blindly trusted the Gen AI to do its job. there will always be hallucinations, and you always have to double check the output. That's super important as well.
Is a hallucination like just fake information, or
is what the AI thinks the answer is, but it just makes it up.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
But is it linked to, for example, a search engine such as Google? So does it look through all of the data on the internet and then comes up with an answer? Or?
Yeah, so that's slightly more complicated.
Okay.
Why? Because if we look at ChatGPT, let's say last year, the answer would be no. So frontier models, as we call it, so that's ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, they're all based off basically scraping the whole internet, and they're trained on that information. That information, though, is not retained inside of the model. It becomes a little bit complicated, so let's skip how that works.
Yeah.
But the idea would be I ask it a question, it has a knowledge cutoff date, so the answer would be probably 80% right, just a ballpark figure there. What we have now is something that's super recent, since a week or 3 ago, which is deep research. It's a new feature by OpenAI. Perplexity just introduced that as well.
For sales, right?
Sorry?
They call it the sales cannon, literally, because it really helps generating leads.
It could be. I haven't tried that yet. So basically what it does is you ask it a question and it goes scour the internet and looks at 30, 40, 50 sources in 10, 15 minutes. Something we cannot do, right? Because we have to read the whole thing. So it looks at all the sources. It combines all of the information. It has something that we call a reasoning model. So it starts to think about, hey, how accurate is this information? What should I present to the end user? And then it gives you basically an essay of, hey, this was your question. This is all of the information that we found on this. So that is connected to the internet. That's not how the classic ChatGPT works. So I would definitely recommend using the Pro version, where you can start using these kind of tools, because that information is much more reliable that way. And you can double check your sources too.
Yeah.
So before, again, never assume it's right. Always double check the work, go to the source, just quickly have a glance like, hey, is what AI is claiming, is it actually true?
Yeah. And one thing we were talking about before as well is like, if we talk to ChatGPT, it seems so sure about it. It's giving me the answer so confidently. And then I'm saying, oh, actually, I don't think that's right. And then it goes, you're completely right. It's incorrect. But you mentioned like there's a way around that, like some better prompts we can use to improve that.
Yeah, definitely. I encountered this in the early days of ChatGPT, and I started to do some research like, hey, how can we avoid that? So it's actually very basic, very simple. At Loop, we use something called radical candor. That's something I always prompt into. Use radical candor, be direct, be disagreeable. I don't want you to just agree with me. Always tell me the reason why you gave me a certain answer. So I also understand where the answer comes from. Having it prompting like that gives you insight into the answer, but also will give you more questions. That's also one of those things. Ask it to ask you questions to clarify the prompt. Like at the end of each prompt, I always say, ask me any question you need to give me a better output. Yeah. And then it usually generates quite a few questions. I was like, yeah, I should have mentioned that in the context. And yeah, much better outputs that way.
One thing I do is I say, like, imagine, I said, I am a HR professional. Like, imagine you're me. What would you do in this situation? I don't know if that makes any difference.
Yeah. Back in the day, and this is, let's say, up until 6 months ago. Yeah.
Back in the day, feels like years ago.
In AI land, that's like light years ago. You had something that was the role prompt. So I would say, hey, take the role of
like
an elite.
You're a lawyer, right?
Exactly. Yeah. But to stay on the same example, take the role of an elite HR professional with X amount of years of experience working
elite
for
HR professional.
So working with companies like A, B, C, D, because if you give those companies, it also knows a little bit about how do these companies operate. So give it like a persona. That was the idea. Give it the persona, and then it will emulate that persona. And the more information you give it, the better it will be able to emulate it. Now, for most models, it's not necessary to do. It also doesn't hurt to still keep prompting that way. Yeah.
And now we're talking a lot about ChatGPT prompting, etc.
Yeah.
But let's say I'm starting a new client tomorrow, or I'm a listener, I'm landing a new job. What are then, for example, tools, maybe especially for HR, that I should use,
Yeah.
especially looking at the employee life cycle from onboarding to attraction, recruitment to, I don't know, offboarding?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think per company that will always be different, of course.
Yes.
Always have the basics ready. So we talk a lot about ChatGPT. That's just one of those models out there. I like to have ChatGPT for, let's say, the more general purpose model. I have Claude to do writing. So when we're talking about employer branding or writing job descriptions, it's much better, much more human in the writing. ChatGPT writing, you can usually see that's been written by ChatGPT.
The interpunction is so ChatGPT. It's like the stripe.
Yes, and certain words that are always coming back. You can spot it from a mile away.
Yeah.
Claude is much better at doing that. DeepSeek, which is our new Chinese competitor, is actually really, really good. Also at copywriting. And then we have Gemini that I'm still testing the new one. So what do all these models are all the same thing? They're general purpose models, but they have different strengths and cons to them. And figuring out what works for you and what's the type of task that you're using day to day, so which models should you be working with, that's an important one. So that's the basics of it, right? You can start thinking about how innovative do you want to be?
Very innovative.
Right? You want to be very innovative. Let's say you have a lot of applications. You're working at a client, big name, lots of applicants. You're getting tons of questions from candidates from a recruitment perspective. You could build an AI chatbot. Not very difficult, not necessarily the most sexy thing. But what if you do that in a voice? So you come to the website, you actually click on it, and the candidate can have a conversation with your company, but through AI.
Oh.
So there's something called 11 Labs. They're very good at voice. You can basically tag that into your database. So if you have a database where all of the information is stored, it can have a conversation like, hey, how long does an average process take? What's the budget for a certain role, et cetera, et cetera. So instead of typing everything out, it can have a more human-like experience. So those are sort of AI tools that you could start using, yeah.
And for example, the sourcing part, if we look at recruiting, I personally worked as a recruiter also for a few years, and that was the least favorite part of my job. And it cost so much time to do the perfect search. And is there also already a life hack for that? Because I know LinkedIn, I'm not sure if they're allowing these type of things already, or
not automated.
No.
Because if we start doing it automated, they lose a chunk of their income, I guess.
Yeah.
So they're not a big fan of automations. There's no one life hack.
No.
That's not there yet. There are certain things in development. Like, for example, Claude was the one that introduced this. It's called computer use. ChatGPT is also rolling this out, which means you're giving the AI full control over your computer. So you just tell it what to do. So, for example, source a web developer, just a random role, a web developer. You give it these instructions. It will take over your computer. It takes your mouse. It goes, types in LinkedIn, and it basically mimics human behavior.
Oh.
We're very early days. Yes, this was my reaction as well. Funny thing is, during test runs, what happened for these bots basically took a break as well, mimicking humans. So they were doing their tasks.
I'm gonna get a coffee.
They went to look up, what was it? It was a national park in the US. Looking at nature pictures. They were doing the work, and then they started looking at nature pictures for like 10 minutes before then resuming again. Like they actually took a break. So that's how good they're emulating humans. So no, that's super early days. I do expect we will have some advancements this year on that. So that could become the life hack. For now, I personally am still doing some sourcing, and I am using these basic foundational models like ChatGPT, where I build custom GPTs that help me to source. Like, for example, they help me to understand the search a little bit better, to give me new angles, come up with different skill sets that might be complementary, to think about, hey, what are alternative titles that we could look for? Maybe companies we should be sourcing at. So all of that information, it's helping me to process much faster than we used to do that in the past. And even outreach messages as well. So I built a custom GPT called Martha, and that prompt is like 3 pages long. And it has all of the information on the company, on the roles that I'm looking for, on the way that I like to do reach outs. I don't like to do mass reach outs. It's not my thing.
Oh.
So before AI, I was doing about 4 to 5 reach outs, really hyper personalized. Now, still hyper personalized, I'm doing 13 to 15 an hour.
Wow.
Why? Because I can just download the LinkedIn profile, put it in Martha, and she will hyper-personalize the first message, the second message. She can do a script as well, because there's also tools like HeyGen or Synthesia that allow you to create your own digital AI avatar. So you're talking to the person. So you can send a video of your AI twin talking to the person, pitching the role. So there's a lot of these different things that you can do. And that slashes the time of actually manually having to do this and writing it out. It just becomes copy-paste and curation. And that's the most important thing with AI. It's all about curating the right information. And that's why you need to become an expert.
So, but so when you talk about like a custom GPT, is that when I've, for example, I'm on ChatGPT and then I've prompted and it's iterated on the prompt and then created something? That's a custom GPT, right?
So CustomGPT, let me ask you a question. How many times are you using the same prompt in a different chat?
A lot.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah.
But I'm not an expert yet.
So that's where CustomGPTs will help you guys out. So CustomGPT is where you put that one prompt into, there's a GPT store and you click on Create Custom GPT. You put your prompt there and it gives you a new chat window. Let's say, for example, it's your outreach GPT. So you write down, this is how I like to do my outreach. So instead of every time writing that out, it's already there. So the only thing you need to do is that follow-up. And for example, in this case, you only need to upload a profile and it knows what to do already. So it's pre-programmed in a way.
Yeah.
Again, no coding, just natural language to do whatever you want it to do.
Got it.
Cool.
So saving you tons of time.
So one thing I'm thinking about now is like the privacy element, right? Because again, like in HR, we're using a lot of sensitive information. And for example, you just talked about candidates and putting profiles in, which will have like PII, personal identifiable information.
Yeah.
And in some companies, particularly if I'm looking at financial fintech companies, for example, like the privacy side is super important to them. So if I'm on my ChatGPT Pro account, is that information safe?
Yeah.
On ChatGPT, you should assume it's safe when you're using Pro or Teams or Enterprise. Enterprise is like the safest level there.
And I guess that's the same as any like SaaS tool that I use, right? For example, even my HR system.
Yes. So you have to always look if, for example, your data is being used to train the model, which you can just turn off with ChatGPT. If you're looking at a Claude, it's by default never training the model. So that's a little bit safer. If you look at DeepSeek, don't use DeepSeek online, only on, and that's where you need help of some developers to run that locally. So if you run that locally on your own devices, you can input whatever because it's stored on your device, right? It's a difficult conversation. Why? Because we have to trust that these companies will keep their end of the bargain by not using our data. And for now, from a legal perspective, as long as you have an enterprise account, you're usually always good. If you have a Teams or a Pro account, double check the settings to make sure that you're not feeding training data. That's the most important thing. And double check with your legal compliance, just so they don't come after me.
Yeah, because I think that is a common fear in HR, right? We also, for example, have, if you want to do an engagement survey and you want to put in all the results in ChatGPT to help you analyze it. Yeah, I don't dare to do it yet. I still are doing this manually because I thought, what if? What if this leaks all over the internet? And then,
Yeah, so no, enterprise accounts, you're good. Okay. Don't worry about that. So push for enterprise accounts where possible. It's slightly more expensive than Pro accounts. So usually I believe they're charging €60, $60, depending on where you are, per account, instead of, let's say, 25 for regular users. So it's a little bit more expensive, but you are getting the security aspect.
Yeah, and like this is another like area where when the finance team starts to take a look at all the accounts, then they're like, okay, well, where can we save money in licenses, right? Because there's all these tools being used all the time. And then what I'm seeing at companies now is they're like, well, not everyone needs the ChatGPT account, just use Gemini. But then people are saying, and also apparently Gemini is safer because it's in your environment. But then people are telling me that it's not as good in terms of
no, I would question the terms if it's safer because it's in your own. I could say that DeepSeek is actually the safest in that sense.
If you use it properly.
If you use it properly, because everyone is like, oh no, but it's feeding everything to China. Yes, on the online version, that's true. Yeah. So it really depends, and this is something where you have to talk to your IT department and your legal department on, hey, where is this data being stored? Yeah. And ChatGPT, we can definitely assume, Claude, we can also assume that if you're paying for certain accounts, your data has to be safe. And the same goes for Google with Gemini as well.
Yeah. Talking about Gemini, I mean, we have now also Gemini, Fireflies, and a lot of tools that that record kind of your meeting and transcript it and then make kind of a summary and an action plan for you. I try to use a few of them, but also for me that is not working very amazingly yet. So do you also have some tips for the listeners on those tools, which you should use, which you shouldn't?
So there's no perfect tool out there.
No.
So that's let's start there.
Yet.
So what did I decide? I decided to build my own. So I used CustomGPTs to build my own tool. So we use Microsoft Teams at work. And so instead of buying yet another tool to record these conversations, I actually use the native transcription. So I used to ask people, hey, do you mind recording? Now I don't actually need to record the whole meeting. I just need to record the transcription because I don't need their image anyway. So it lowers the bar for people to say yes as well.
Good one.
So I do transcription. After the conversation, I load up that transcription into my CustomGPT, which is trained on the cultural values of the company, things that we're looking at, the intake form, the job description. It basically rolls out a scorecard. It rolls out that scorecard that has all of the basic stuff like personal information, how did they answer based on the skill set of the role, but it also gives me feedback as a recruiter. I built in a bias indicator, for example, to analyze, hey, my line of questioning, is there any bias that you can identify and give me that feedback for the next time that I interview? But also regular feedback for me as a recruiter or one of the interviewers using it. A cool case was I had a hiring manager and I was giving her feedback and I noticed hey, she's not necessarily listening. So I gave her this tool. And then the tool told her the same thing. And she came back to me like, hey, this tool is telling me I'm too focused on communication style. I was like, yeah, I understand why it's saying that. And then after that, she actually improved. So hearing it from someone else, then the recruiter also helps in validating the feedback that it's giving. So again, this is a custom tool that I built for our needs at the company, but you can do the same thing for yours. And you can build that basically within a day and just refine it from there on out because it's never going to be perfect on the first try. And it's all about iteration. It's all about collecting information. Every 2 weeks, you sit down and you start reprompting, tweaking the prompt, and asking for feedback from all of the users.
That's really cool. And that's actually leading me to our dilemma, because quite related to this. So what I want you to ask, I'm going to ask you a dilemma and you have to pick. So what would you rather? Would you rather rely 100% on AI for all your hiring decisions or rely 100% on humans?
That's a very easy one, actually.
Yeah, now I see. It's quite a stupid dilemma.
Always trust the humans. You can at this moment in time.
I thought you were going to say always trust AI.
No, definitely not. No. Always trust the human. Both human and AI, when talking about hiring, we're gonna make mistakes.
Yeah.
Right? And that's because we both have biases. We're both falling into certain traps. I think the best answer is actually a combination of both to try and be as data-driven as possible. But if I had to choose, I would choose humans over AI at this moment in time.
At this moment in time.
Yeah.
But maybe when we do this again in a year, you have a different answer.
I'm not sure if the EU will agree with me, though, since the new EU AI Act explicitly says that we cannot use AI to enforce hiring decisions or let AI make a hiring decision. So that from a legal perspective, that decision has been made for us.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think anyways, at this moment in time, it would not be good enough. No.
Okay, very clear. Thank you. And I'm looking at the time, and I also, what we always want to round up with for the audience is something really practical. So let's say tomorrow I'm starting at my client, and I want to upskill my AI game. I'm using ChatGPT already, and some of Fireflies, I don't know. What is some practical tips that you can implement tomorrow? Like something that you can start doing right away?
Yeah, I think where over 90% of the people have to still understand is how to really create a good prompt.
Yeah.
Because that is a game changer, and that allows you to get value out of things like ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini at the level of a lot of paid tools. You're paying a lot of money for tools that are basically what you call a wrapper around the same models that you already have access to. So if you learn to prompt correctly, and what does that mean? That means that you always start with the end result. So if we're talking about, let's go back to the example of hiring and rating an interview. If I wanted to create a scorecard, I need to give it examples of how does a good scorecard look like so it understands what the outcome should be. It's about context. Why are we doing what we're doing? See it as an intern that has PhD level intelligence, zero experience. So you need to explain all of the nitty gritty stuff. And the more context you give it, the better it will understand the output. So that's also super important. Don't forget to tell it to ask you questions. That's really important. And what else? You could actually also still keep that role, because maybe the AI won't need it, but it will help you get into the mindset. So for example, same example, ask it to be an interviewer, elite level interviewer, that's data-driven, that is looking for answers that, what are you looking for? We're looking for a high performer that excels in X, Y, Z, et cetera, et cetera. So really go down to the nitty-gritty details, and that will give you so much better answers. It's insane. So yes, sometimes these prompts can become quite long, but that's where CustomGPTs come in. So you don't have to copy and paste them or write them out all of the time. You just store them in one place, one location, and you can repeat that process, rinse and repeat, in a super easy way.
Wow. And so to answer the question, AI, our new HR intern, I think we can say yes.
Yes, 100%.
100%.
Yeah.
And like 100%. And if I hear you talk as well, it sounds like just number one, just try things, try out tools, play around with them.
Yeah.
But also as well, like if we want to be the person that's going to make a difference in the company, then if we're really like competent at using these tools to drive increases in productivity, I guess, then that's going to help us keep our jobs, which we were concerned about earlier.
We're going to be like the manager of AI.
Right.
They're going to make your jobs a lot more fun as well.
Yeah, because then we can focus on the fun stuff, like the creative stuff, the creativity, the critical thinking.
The human part.
The human part.
That's what we're all about, right?
Yeah.
We're about connecting with humans and not pushing papers every day.
No, indeed. So thank you so much. I really learned a lot during this episode. I think it's sad that we're already out of time, but thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom. And see you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks. I'd like to do a quick shout out to our allies Personio for making this episode possible.